Hi, my name's Jerry Harris. I'm the publisher of Christian Standard. And one of the things that we've been doing recently is archiving, which is really pretty funny when you see people like 30 years ago, in old Christian Standards. Well, one of the things that discovered was we started doing a megachurch report in like 1997. And we started putting baptisms in that report in 1998, long before Outreach Magazine did that. And I just had this idea, what if we could take like 1998, that was an exhaustive list of churches that were running over 1,000, because that was the metric back then, and compare them to 20 years later where the metric was over 2,000. It was like 57 churches. And I was able to do that. And those churches had not only grown, but they had birthed churches that were now over 1,000. And here's what I found out. I found out that sample of churches had grown by a factor of 3.2. That there were 3 times plus people more going to those churches than they were 20 years ago. And that was happening in a span of 20 years. And I wrote an article about it called The Invisible Renaissance, because I don't think that's ever happened in the history of our movement. I love our movement. That's just incredible. And it's just been a quiet thing. And the question that came up in my mind was, do we have the leaders for that? And so that was the next research project to see where we are. And our leadership production was pretty close to the same number that it had been back then. So that's a problem. And I wanted us to look in 4 directions today. And this incredible panel I have up here, they're going to talk a little bit about those 4 directions, inside the church, outside the church, outward and downward, okay? But before we do that, I've got Rick Rusaw up here, runs Spire. And I hear him say the statement that I agree with. Our churches have never been healthier. Our ideals have never been more alive, and our identity has never been more at risk. The third part of that statement is pretty alarming. So how does that apply to our pipeline of leadership inside of our movement? Can you answer that?
Yeah, so one of the things that, I was 28 years at LifeBridge and got to see what was happening inside a lot of our churches and connectivity there. And in the last 5 years, just watching what's going on, our churches are doing some phenomenal things. Independent Christian churches. Some of the most innovation comes out of our churches. Some of the best paths forward. Some of the largest churches in our country, CCV, are a part of our tribe. We're healthy in so many ways. And yet, we are losing the connectivity that we used to have. We had it around a variety of things, colleges for a long time, or local conferences or state conventions were one way. The North American in some ways connected it. This is actually the largest gathering of ministry-hatted people, vocational ministry people in our movement. The reality is we are doing so well, and yet we remain so unknown in so many ways and don't have this sense of connectivity. I was at a gathering, a day-and-a-half strategy session with 15 CEOs of the largest church planting organizations in our country. And they're talking about how could we do better at church planting. Warren Bird was speaking to this group, and he said that if your denomination isn't planting 4% new churches of your total population of churches, you're a declining denomination. Now, as an independent group, we're not a denomination. We're like I get asked all the time about us outside of our tribe. We're a small D denomination. Nobody votes you in, nobody votes you out, but we kind of have some rules. And here's the deal. We don't really know, but it looks like that in the last 5 to 7 years, we've dropped about 10% in the total number of churches. Now, some of those have become campuses for other places. Some of those have combined resources. But the reality is, when we look at where our leaders coming, we really struggle. I think every leader of an organization has to think about 3 things a little bit every day. Vision, where are we going? Bottom line, can we actually get there? And succession, who are we bringing along behind us? And one of the things that feels like we've lost is the challenge we have of bringing people along Who is it that you're looking to in your church that might be someone who's working and volunteer, who might become someone who could lead or pastor a congregation? Who's that young person that you're pouring into, challenging, saying, God wants you to be engaged in ministry? We really do have a challenge in front of us, and I think it's about what are we doing to look to bring people along?
Absolutely. So we know there's a problem, and the things of the past are not exactly the things that are working now. So we have to think at the windshield, not the rearview mirror. Like, what are those new things? And one of the places, probably one of the biggest places that we see leadership pipeline is inside the church. Now, Mountain Christian Church is one of the oldest churches in our, we just did that in Christian Standard, and I mean, they go
200.
Oh yeah, 200 years old. Can you imagine a 200-year-old church? And Ben is 200 years old as well, you know, and it's great. And it's one of the most innovative churches, and Ben's an incredible leader. You've always been really proactive in addressing challenges in innovative ways from the senior pastor's chair. You've always done that. So how is Mountain meeting the challenge of raising up leaders?
Yeah, I think it's great to start with the local church question because we all agree that we need more leaders. And do you know where every single leader that we need right now and everyone that we will need in the future to grow and multiply, do you know where they are right now? They're in your church. They're in our churches. They're maybe seventh graders, so it's a long play. They might be seniors in high school or heading off to university or just graduated from Bible college or seminary. They might be midlife. They might be second career people or a recently retired person or someone who's a diamond in the rough. But that's where they are. They're in the local church, and the more we can see our churches as places where leadership development is absolutely critical, like Rick was just saying, I think, in terms of why we exist and how we do ministry, the better we'll be. I think that's where I would just like to just start is by just saying it's easy to get consumed with just filling slots and getting to the next thing and almost viewing leadership development as a luxury we can't afford to invest in. Or, if it happens by accident, we're glad for that as an afterthought. But it's got to become why we exist. It's part of the process of making disciples. When we make disciples who make disciples, some of them end up as leaders and they reproduce. And it's got to also become kind of how we do things. So whatever traction we've gained in this area and success we've had, I think boils down to a few quick things I would say. One, we've developed a clear pipeline, like a process that maps out steps along a discernible pathway that says, here's how you become a leader in this place, and we've tried to make it uniform between all the different ministries. So there's discernible things we can do, there's trainings we can have, conversations we can have, so that people who are gonna be leaders can be seen, they can be shaped, they can be sent, and then they can be supported along the way. It's a part of the process of making disciples. This gets us out of the program way of thinking, like if we have a service and groups that'll automatically produce leaders. It doesn't really work that way automatically, but a pipeline does. You can have a pipeline. You should have one, okay? Second, the idea of leadership development, we've kind of hit on this, but just being baked into the culture and the expectation of what everyone, so it's not a department, it's not someone on your team that's gonna be the leader developer, but everyone kind of owning what Rick was saying, like who's your apprentice, who are you developing, who's the person that you're bringing along, so that when you train small group leaders, you're not just saying your goal is to lead a group or start a group, but from the beginning we're asking, who's the co-leader that's coming along with you who might start the next group and as you send them out. So it's this idea of what you celebrate, you will duplicate. So every staff meeting, we put up a slide and it says, here are all the new leaders that have been raised up and who raised them up. And here's our goal for that, and we all applaud those people because that's the win. Third, we have a robust internship and residency program, and I think every church, no matter what the size or shape, can do something in this area. We've developed a pretty robust one. We have a strong partnership, for example, with Milligan University for a semester with us, but we welcome all kinds of colleges and seminaries, and you can do the same. And residencies we've got to get after because I think more and more college graduates don't have a clue, and they need opportunities to come hang out in your church and try ministry on and have people talk to them about what it could mean for them even after they graduate from college, so that your church can become, we like to think of ourselves as a teaching hospital. So everything and every ministry becomes this teaching hospital kind of mindset where people can be empowered for the future, and everyone benefits. The students and residents and interns, but your staff. Turns out if you're gonna have a resident in kids ministry, you gotta figure out what kids ministry is. And then finally, being aggressive and assertive with I, see, and you conversations, where we just get better at saying, every leader became a leader when another leader said, you could be a leader. And getting more aggressive and assertive about that. It doesn't happen through stage announcements. It happened when someone gave you an opportunity, invited you to the table and said, here's a place for you. So let's become leadership factories that use everything from becoming a teaching hospital to a pipeline to apprentices, internships, and always be scanning the horizon for that next leader and making it a part of who we are as a process of making disciples. That's what I would say.
That's incredible. And that's why we need to be networked, because we need to get best practices. And can you send me that stuff? And can you help me move that ball forward in my ministry environment? Next on the panel is Tim Foote, and Tim is the head of Slingshot. And while we're talking about inside with Ben, we're talking about outside with Tim, because one thing Slingshot does is they widen our circle. And we are, by the way, the restoration movement is a unity movement, and we're looking to build bridges, not burn them. And that is an incredible thing to be able to do. And Slingshot does that really well. So you oversee one of the largest placement organizations connected to our movement, Tim. How do we widen our network circles without compromising in order to fill our leadership needs?
Well, thanks, Jerry and Spire, for having this conversation, because I believe it is one of the biggest challenges, not just facing our movement right now, but the big C church is leadership, supply. And Ben, great hearing you talk about what the local church is doing, because people think that Slingshot is a candidate factory. We are ministry connectors. The candidate factory, as you said, is the church. And so as we look inside, we've got to raise up our leaders and tell a more beautiful story about the greatest calling of all, and that is to lead in the local church. Somehow we've gotten complacent. We've delegated it to summer camps. They're great, Eric. It's great. COO is fantastic. But it is our responsibility to call these young leaders into the next generation of leadership. Not just the young leaders, but what about the 77 million Americans that are over 55? And you bring that number down, it's still tens of millions of Americans that are between 55 and 65 that want to do their ultimate contribution, their kingdom contribution, that we need to call out of them. So here's 3 critical questions you need to be asking. Who are we as a church? Because identity determines ministry momentum and hiring. Who are we? And people are called to clarity of mission and vision. The second question is, who are we growing to be? Are we a culture that needs to continue to perpetuate, and we need to raise up leaders from within and partner with leadership development groups like Leadership Pathway? Check out their booth. Or do we need to grow at a pace that our current staff is not capable of doing, and we need to look outside? So the third question is, who are we connecting with? And don't think that the focus that staffing takes away from local church ministry isn't a cost. It's often a cost that's greater than partnering with an outside organization. When you need to partner with that organization, make sure that you're aligned culturally and you're ready to get messy with them. Because I don't know whether you know this, but staffing, succession, transition is some of the messiest ministry work there is. So you want a group, a partner that you can get messy with in this most important work. So how do we broaden our networks without compromising? We widen the funnel and we let leaders lead, and we encourage them to lead. 1 in 3 leaders usually gets traction. So we got to do some investing, friends. We also widen our network. We partner with other churches like CCV and Mountain and churches that are doing intentional residencies, because the leaders you don't hire mightn't grow in your soil, but they might grow in your soil. So you want to make sure you have those intentional connections, and then you partner with groups that are culturally aligned with you. We're going to have to get innovative, friends. We're going to have to look at bivocational ministry in the future. We're going to have to look at remote work. We're going to have to look at creative incentives to pull leaders from the marketplace into our churches, which is where they should be leading from and impacting the marketplace. I've got a son who's a junior in high school. He's in the college football recruitment phase right now. I'm learning a lot about what the church should be doing to call people to play on our team.
Awesome. So the workhorses, historically, the workhorses of our leadership pipeline have been our Bible colleges and our Christian colleges. The reason I went to the Crossing 26 years ago is somebody called Ken Idleman. And he said, I got this guy that might work out for you. I don't know. And they're so critical to the leadership pipeline and have been so critical to that. But we have to figure out new ways of being able to just build on that relevance. Dr. Stacey Bartlett's down here from Point University. She's the chief of staff at Point. And you're at the cutting edge of innovation to build leaders that using a new idea called a subscription program. And you've done incredible things with secular companies like Chick-fil-A. I don't want to steal your thunder on that. How is that adaptable to the local church? Share some about that.
Yeah, thanks, Jerry. So the whole reason why we created this subscription program was because we had local business owners in the quick service restaurant industry who came to us and said, maybe there's a way that education and, can partner with us to help increase our retention in the workforce here in the local stores. So, of course, we had to get creative, innovative, and what we did was we flipped the model of who pays for the education. So instead of the students having tuition and fees that they pay, we flipped that and passed that cost along to the business owner. So the business owner pays a monthly or annual fee, and they're able to provide our online courses and programs to the team members working in their stores. So as you can imagine, that kind of caught on pretty quickly. The business owners were excited to be able to offer this program. And then the students, they're enrolling, they're graduating, like their life change, with the power of Christian higher education. So it didn't take long before other industries started reaching out to us. We had different businesses, nonprofits, and churches. So Point has a long history with partnering with churches in a variety of formats. And the churches came to us and said, hey, can we figure out a way to do this thing that you're doing over here with these restaurants? And we were like, of course, let's figure it out. So what we were hearing was not that churches necessarily wanted full degree programs. What they wanted was some courses. We have a biblical studies certificate, and we just fit that right inside the subscription model. We piloted a program over the course of a year or two with that certificate program because people were coming back to ministry after maybe they spent, the first half of their career in a different industry, or they've got a degree in another area, or there's a volunteer who's been serving in your church and just wants to feel a bit more comfortable with leading a small group. So they didn't need a full degree. They just wanted to, increase their biblical knowledge. So what we're looking at now is there are some churches who likely need access to our fully online ministry program. So we're fitting that in the subscription model and, in conversation with churches as well about doing that. So ultimately, the reason why we're all here is because we care deeply about the church. We care about ministry, leadership development. So we think this is just, one maybe unique way that we can kind of stand in the gap and help raise up those leaders. If that's a course or two, if that's a full program, whatever that looks like, we're ready to help leaders lead well. Because as we're seeing today, the answer to some of these challenges, it's not a one size fits all. It's going to be multifaceted. And so we stand ready to serve and to equip those who are currently leading, but also for those who are going to be training for future leadership in the days, weeks, months, and years from now.
Absolutely. Now, how many of you at some time in your life went to a CIY, went to Christ in Youth? Yeah? Yeah. I mean, nobody takes care or shepherds this gen better than that they do, and connecting with churches with regards to leaders, and they've awakened so many possibilities. Eric Epperson's back there at the end of the line representing CIY, and we've been hearing a lot about how you're responding as an organization to this challenge of building a leadership pipeline through this gen. So tell us what that looks like and how you see it empowering our churches for now and in the future.
For now and the future. So it's interesting, CIY for decades has recognized that vocational ministry decision at the end of the week. Friends, like nearly 2,000 young people stood up this summer and said, that's something that I want to do. It's incredible to be able to watch that. And we've done it for a long time, and I was talking to my friend Will this summer, who's now a youth pastor, and he, like so many of us, began to tell this story about this room that he was in where he felt the call, right? We believe that moment was real. That I almost said the Holy Spirit moved, but I've been working on not saying that for about 20 minutes now. And so he felt that moment, and he said he just stood up and responded. Months later, he's talking to his youth pastor about this, and he's kind of shrugging it off, saying, I don't know, I just don't really know what I'm doing. And Will tells me nearly 20 years later, he said, my youth pastor looked at me and he said, no, you can do this. You've got to follow through with this. And so we're finding that it's not so much that moment, but something is wrong with follow through. And so we ask a bunch of people in ministry now, hundreds of them, who made decisions at CIY events, and actually asked them, okay, why are you actually doing this? And far and away, it came down to two primary reasons. The first is this, much like Will's story. Someone early on in my decision-making process believed in me. Let me just say something I'm really convicted of. If you're a senior leader in this room, you have an immense power to be able to do something, to catalyze and move a generation of young people who want to be involved in church work. And then let me also say this. If you're not going to camp, if you're not going to CIY events, guys, you're missing an opportunity to be in the moment where that happens and speak great power into that. Your assistant will clear your schedule, okay? You can bring your CPAP machine. We'll make room for it, right? Would you come hang out with us for a week, all right? The middle school kids will think you're Darth Vader. It'll be really cool, right? Here's the second thing they told us. People in ministry now who made vocational ministry decisions at CIY. They were given opportunities to serve right away. Friends, we need to start pursuing engagement, not excellence on our stages. We need to give young people a chance to make messes in front of our congregations, to do things poorly, and then ultimately do things well, because the future of the state of the church depends on it. Barna tells us this, 1 in 4 pastors plan to retire in the next 7 years. There's a huge pipeline issue, and we want to do what we can to create a catalytic moment, but then also build a framework, essentially through an app, a learning management system, to help give students 3 things: relationships, resources, and reps. Because then you start doing that at 16, 17 years old, you can actually go, oh, I can do this, and you might just end up there. I'd love to chat with you about it because we're looking for a movement of churches to help us with it.
A couple of nights ago, Ashley said that we want to run with the horses. And I can tell you right now, this is just an example of everything that we see out here. As a movement, we've got plenty of horsepower to fill these pipelines. And we just have to start the conversation. We have to just take the opportunity of building these networks, of talking to one another, of networking with each other, so that this movement has a history that all the blessings that you've received, that the people coming after us will still have those blessings. Thank you so much.